Okay, I got there. All right. Yes, public hearing on permit processing. So the Washington Local Project Review Act requires jurisdictions to implement additional measures to accelerate the permit review process. The orders of the day today are for Planning Commission to hold a public hearing, consider the proposed amendments, receive public testimony, and provide a recommendation to City Council to either approve the zoning code amendments, deny, or approve with proposed modifications. So Planning Commission discussed this already in October, October 21st, and now we're at the public hearing stage. If this is approved tonight, it will go on to City Council for a study session and a hearing. So Washington state requirements, local jurisdictions must implement these revisions by January of 2025. And obviously timely processing of permit applications is a goal of the Growth Management Act. In addition to the GMA, streamlined development and review and permitting processes is also a goal stated in the Puget Sound Regional Council Vision 2050. The proposed changes would put us in compliance with goals and policies for housing and economic development in the City of Bremerton's current comprehensive plan and in the updated comprehensive plan, which is in progress. So there are three categories under the permit processing that we'll talk about: permit process updates, increased permit efficiencies, and then some additional measures and housekeeping as long as we're in the code making revisions. So permit process updates. All right. So currently the time to process land use permits is 120 days. This would be revised as follows: 65 days for project permits that do not require public notice, 100 days for project permits that do require public notice, and 170 days for project permits that require public notice and a public hearing. 170 days is actually more time than we're currently allowed for a permit with a public hearing, so that actually will help us in some ways. Note that these changes apply to land use permits, not building permits. That's in the bill language. And staff is currently working with our city attorney's office on some language to exclude certain permits, such as fire department permits or those that might be impacted by a site with cultural resources. Those are still in process, so they're not actually in the code that is attached to your packet, but wouldn't, represent much of a change. All right, increased permit efficiencies. So State Bill 5290 requires jurisdictions to issue refunds for permits that don't meet timelines, unless the jurisdiction has introduced efficiencies to streamline the permit process. So we have to implement at least 3 of these measures in order to prevent having to issue refunds of permit fees if they don't meet the timelines. Out of 10 options, we chose 3. So these are all of the options available from the state to jurisdictions. So of the menu of options, these 3, the first that are underlined here, optional pre-submittal conference, I'll talk more about these, required public hearings, and outright permitted housing uses. We selected these because they'll result in shorter permit timelines and decreased staff workload. All right. So as far as the pre-submittal application conferences, these are required for certain permit types. They're informal meetings that enable the applicant to get some feedback on their preliminary project proposals. We have representatives from every department in those meetings. The city only charges $100 for this permit, so it's a very good incentive for coordinating with us early. We would simply just transition this to being always optional rather than required. So required public hearings. This one would remove the requirement for any public hearing that's not required per state statute, but still retain requirements for public comment. We've got some of these, the type 3 permits, or the permits that would have required a public hearing in our current code listed below: adaptive reuse of commercial buildings, conditional use permits, variances, that type of thing. All of the same criteria would be applied. We just would, we would be doing it administratively and not require a public hearing. There's actually, and as a side note, there's actually only been one type 3 permit for any of these types of applications in the last 5 years. So we don't really anticipate much of an impact of implementing this. And then outright permitted housing uses. So the following housing uses would transition to outright permitted in zones where they're currently permitted but conditionally. You would still retain the development standards. So cottage housing, group residential class 1, which is like an assisted living type of use, senior housing complex, and manufactured home park. And some more on those 4 uses, just to show you some uses that are at least similar to that. So there is a manufactured home or mobile home park over on Price Road over near Kitsap Lake. Senior housing complex similar to the Vintage on Sheridan Road. Group residential class 1, the Arbor on 9th Street would be that type of use. And then cottage housing on Snyder Avenue, there is a development that is similar to what our cottage housing represents, although it wasn't developed under the current cottage housing code. All right. And then the additional measures I mentioned in housekeeping. So design review board. The design review process is required for certain projects within the downtown sub-area and the Harrison Heights sub-area. And it currently includes 2 public meetings, which sometimes the second one the board waives, and eventually a building permit as a type 2 permit, requiring an additional public comment period and opportunity to appeal. This creates an unpredictable permitting process where a developer may not know if their project is feasible until the very last permit in the line, which is the building permit. With this revision, the design review meetings would still require public comment, but not the building permit. And then applicant response time. For an applicant to respond to city requests for information. Basically, currently we allow 90 days for that. We could just transition this to a 60-day response, and that would actually, ensure a more timely response from the applicant and keep things moving. With these new permit processing timelines, it's going to be important to do that. Applicants could have their permit denied if requested material is not received after the 3rd request for information, or alternatively, the applicants could come to an agreement with the city for a separate permit timeline. All right, and then informational signage. The City Council actually requested that we develop a code for increased information to be available to the public regarding upcoming development proposals. The proposal would provide notification for neighbors or any city resident that wants to know what's going on there. The city would provide the sign for the applicant, and it would contain project details and project contact information, and this would be posted during construction so that the public can know what's happening there. So, and down to the orders. Orders of the day: public hearing, consider proposed amendments, receive public testimony, and provide a recommendation to approve, for City Council to approve the amendments, deny, or approve with modification.
Let me see here. I'm sorry.
We're on C, right?
No, we just did that.
Yes, VC1 is the item.
Okay, we'll open up the public workshop for zoning.
No, we need to, at the bottom of the agenda bill for the public hearing on the zoning code amendments. And if you don't have a paper in front of you, I'm happy to bring my packet up. There's a staff recommended motion for your consideration.
It should be on your,
Oh,
If there's somebody who would like to make the motion.
no, it's not on mine.
Can
No, it's not.
This is Commissioner Stebbin. I motion.
Yeah, you see that, I'm looking above. Agreement.
Is it in the script? It's not in the script. Okay.
Okay, I'm completely lost here. No,
She wants to, when you call it, Commissioner Stebbin, seconded by,
it's right here, isn't it?
Okay.
Conclude his recommendation.
you need to read the motion. Motion on the floor by Mia as moved to.
I can,
yeah, it's this conclusion recommendations. Based on the findings, the Planning Commission concludes that proposed amendments to the Bremerton Municipal Code.
So I can read it out loud if that would be helpful. So I have Commissioner Stebbin has made the motion, which reads, move to recommend the City Council adopt the text amendments to the Bremerton Municipal Code, Chapter 20.46, as detailed in Attachment 1, based on the staff report and the findings and conclusions presented in Attachment 2. And we're looking for a second to that motion.
Commissioner Coviello, seconds.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on the motion?
Seeing none, call the motion.
We have a motion to move to recommend the City Council adopt the text amendments to Bremerton Municipal Code, Chapter 20.46, as detailed in Attachment 1, based upon the staff report and the findings and conclusions presented in Attachment 2. The motion was made by Commissioner Stebbin and seconded by Commissioner Coviello. Did I get that right? Okay. All in favor?
aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. No, we just did.
Any abstentions? The motion carries 7-0.